My take on the claim of alleged British manipulation of the outcome of the pre-independence Nigerian federal elections. And this article is coming from Metro Daily, Nigeria, saying that I would advise people never to believe that rubbish from that former British colonial official Harold Smith that British rigged the 1959 general elections for the North to control Nigeria. It is a bunch of lies and disjointed attempts to ravish our country and her history. That man was a hired agent recruited to do that dirty job, to entertain whoever was responsible for hiring him to do his bidding. I read this story long time before and dismissed it out of hand and never bothered to react to it in the belief that no sensible person who is familiar with Nigeria will ever believe the rubbish is spewed. I thought Nigerians will follow the footsteps of Dr. now Professor Akasam Abba of Ahmadu Bello University, ABU Zaria, who studied Nigerian political history for over 30 years now, when he dismissed the stuff outright. But unfortunately, the story is still making the rounds. Our younger generation, particularly some of the elite, is not following the footsteps of Professor Akasum Abba on this matter. I refer to this article in responding to Harold Smith with a title, The Rigging of Nigerian History, published in 2007, Zaha Journal of History Research, Abu Zaria, Volume 2, Number 1. But for the benefit of our younger generation and anyone who do not know the reality of the issue at stake on that matter, I would like to make some remarks on the issue just for now. That Mr. Smith, who was born in 1927, 2 years after my birth, was recruited and sent to work in Nigeria in 1955, 2 years after the conclusion of the 1953 Nigerian London Constitutional Conference in Lagos. The issue of Nigeria independence was discussed, though not concluded during that conference. The 1953 constitutional crisis brought about by Chief Enahuru's motion for independence in 1956 forced the British colonial authorities to convene the conference. The refusal of members of parliament from the north to attend further meeting of the House of Representatives in Lagos in protest against the attack by some hooligans against them after the vote in the House against Enahuru's motion for independence led to the convening of the conference in London by the colonial authorities in 1953. In preparation for the conference, British authorities in Nigeria hurriedly made arrangements for provincial conferences in all provinces of northern Nigeria, where a document called 9 Points Agenda for Northern Nigeria, purportedly as a mandate from the people of the north for northern delegates attending the conference, was tabled and adopted. We in the NEPU believe the document was a handiwork of the British colonial officials, spearheaded by a British colonial information officer in northern Nigeria called Captain Moloney. Bogus provincial meetings were held, and that paper was presented and adopted as the position of northern Nigeria to this 1953 Constitutional Conference. Few members from opposition parties were invited to the provincial conferences just to give a semblance of public participation in the discussion of the rules organized by the British officials and called provincial conferences. I was the leader of the NEPU Youth Association and Assistant Publicity Secretary of the party at that time. Few opposition members were allowed to attend the provincial meetings. Some of our members who were invited to the meetings vehemently opposed the 9-point agenda at those meetings just to register a disapproval of the document presented. They were mostly overruled by the senior native authority officials who not only populated those meetings but also presided over them. In order to register our protests at the autocratic way those meetings were handled, the NEPU directed thousands of his supporters all over Kano province to go to Kano International Airport to register disapproval of the masses to the so-called 9-point Northern agenda being taken to the London conference in the name of the masses of northern Nigeria. Our supporters converged at Kano Airport in their thousands during the departure of the delegates to London to show their rejection of the so-called 9-point agenda. Can you imagine? The party decided that we, the leaders, must personally lead the protest at the airport. The then President General of the NEPU, Malam Abba Makwaro, and others led other party leaders to stage the protest at the airport. We went there in large numbers. As a result, big contingents of native authority and the Nigerian police personnel were drafted to the airport to make way for the northern delegates who were going to London conference through Kano Airport to be able to gain access to the tarmac. It was a Herculean task for all the delegates to pass through and enter the plane on that day. Eventually, the police managed to assist the delegates, including Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Sir Ahmadu Bello, Malam Aminu Kano, Abubakar Zukogi, and the rest to join the plane. Later that night, police mounted a swoop on the house of the leading NEPU members, resulting in the arrest of 19 of us who were arraigned before the Emir's court the following day and prosecuted on trumped-up charges of unlawful assembly. All this took place in 1953. 2 years before 1953, 2 years before Mr. Harold Smith was employed to work in Nigeria. It was at that London conference that the modalities for Nigerian independence was discussed. I took the trouble to give this background information to show that Mr. Smith had no idea what it takes to influence the outcome of negotiation for Nigerian independence, let alone be asked by the old Governor General, Sir James Robinson, who was in charge of the entire British colonial officials working in Nigeria, to ask him or any single individual for the matter to rig the 1959 general federal elections in favor of the North. It should be borne in mind that there were a series of elections in Nigeria between 1951 and 1959, a period of 9 years. These were the 1959 regional and federal elections, the 1954 federal elections, the 1956 regional elections, and the 1959 federal elections. All these elections, except that of 1959, were conducted when Mr. Smith was in the UK. Therefore, in giving consideration to the claim by Mr. Smith, it is pertinent to remember that throughout that period, nationalist activism was at its highest level, and nationalist leaders such as Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, Malam Aminu Kano, Chief J.S. Taka, and hosts of others lieutenants were very much around. It is impossible with an array of such leaders and multitude of their militant lieutenants that one individual can manipulate the outcome of the elections that will pave the way for the emergence of leaders who would be given the reign of power in Nigeria's march for independence. I invite anyone reading this presentation to have a good look at the results of series of elections that took place between 1959 and 1951 and 1959, and compare the outcome and see if there was any substantial difference the so-called manipulation by Mr. Smith made to change the outcome in favor of anyone. I hope people will ponder into these results of the elections, particularly those concerning elections to the House of Representatives in 1954 and 1959, and see where manipulations were employed to determine the outcome of those elections. We are mainly talking of elections of the House of Representatives which were held only at 3 different occasions: 1951, 1954, and 1959. In the 1951 elections, members of the House of Representatives were chosen from among members of regional houses and assembly, acting as electoral college. We should compare the number of seats won by the 3 major political parties, NCNC, Action Group, and MPC, as well as their allies in terms of North-South results. There is no big difference in relation to North-South dichotomy in terms of number of members from the 2 areas, North and South, in the House of Representatives. For the purpose of that comparison, we should consider the number of members of the 3 political groups in the National Assembly after the 1951 general elections and the 1959 election in terms of the strength of the 3 political groupings of NCNC, AG, and MPC, along with their allied. It will be noticed that the difference in terms of members of parliament, the situation gave no room for the British colonial authorities or anyone else to influence the outcome of the elections in the 1959. Below is the state of parties in both the 1954-1959 elections to the House of Representatives for verification as follows. The 1954 Constitution increased the membership of the House of Representatives to 184 on 50-50 formula between the North as a bloc and the South, Eastern, Western region, and Lagos combined. Thus, the North and South had equal number of 92 seats each. In 1959, with the total number of 312 seats nationally, MPC won 134 seats, exclusively won in the Northern region. NCNC and NEPU won 89 seats, 8 in the Northern region, 58 in the Eastern region, and 21 in the Western region and Mid-Western regions, and 2 seats in Lagos. AG won 73 seats, 33 in the Western and Mid-Western region, 25 in the Northern region, 14 in the Eastern region, and finally 1 in Lagos. Finally, other parties won 16 seats. Thus, in 1959, total number of northern seats were 167, 134 for MPC, 8 for NEPU, 25 for AG, while the southern seat stood at 145, 81 for NCNC, 48 for AG, and 16 seats for other parties. It should be noted that the difference in number of seats in the House of Representatives between 1954 and 1959 was made possible by the decision to conduct 1959 election on the basis of single-member constituencies on population basis, which was not the case in 1954. Given this incontestable fact, I am paused as to why some people, including journalists and non-journalists alike, keep on listening to someone like Harold Smith, who was just a third-rate labor officer of the colonial government in Nigeria, whose duties and responsibilities were not associated with the process of the disengagement of the British from Nigeria, to make false claims about the 1954 and 1959 elections. If the British rigged the 1959 election just in order to hand over Nigeria to the North, who did the rigging for them in subsequent elections? Okay, who did the rigging for them in subsequent elections? Check the census figure from 1921 to 1921, 1931, and 1952, conducted by the British, and the subsequent ones conducted by Nigerian government since 1963. The North has more than 50% of Nigeria's population since 1911 census, which was conducted during the lifetime of the 2 original protectorates, Northern and Southern protectorates, that existed up to 1914, when the 2 protectorates were merged into the present-day Nigeria, meaning that they have more population and therefore more voters, and politics is an exercise of numbers. In such word renowned American academics as Professor James Coleman and Professor Emeritus Richard Scala, who both closely studied and wrote extensively on Nigeria's struggle for self-determination from colonial rule and nationalism, would all not see and reflect these aspects of rigging elections in their great scholarly works. Then surely it exists only in the warped minds of those who want it to exist. A third-rate colonial labor official with questionable integrity and who failed to graduate in university cannot change Nigeria's national historic truths. So guys, you've heard this whole thing, and like I said, this article is coming from Metro Daily Nigeria. What do you think? What are your takes in what has been said here? I wouldn't want to say much in order not to elongate this video. Leave your comments below in the comment section and have your take. And let's have your take.